Okay, so welcome to everyone to the third session and the last session of the first day today of the Atal FDP at IIT Goa. So today we have with us Dr. Vivek Chaturvedi as an invited resource person and faculty member. He is currently from an assistant professor at IIT Palakkad in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. Previously, he was a research scientist in the School of Computer Science and Engineering at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. He received his MS from Syracuse University, New York, and PhD from Florida International University, Miami. He has also worked in Sun Microsystems on post-silicon validation. Dr. Chaturvedi's current research interests include power and thermal optimization in multi-many core processors, including both 2D and 3D architectures. He is also actively working on hardware security and reliability. He is a reviewer and has served as TPC member for several IEEE ACM journals and conferences. And he is currently also serving as the senior editor for ACM Ubiquity magazine. So those of you who have spent some time looking at my profile, you would find that Dr. Vivek and myself, we share some common places of work. So we are both in Singapore until 2018 when we moved back to India. So welcome, Vivek, to the session, and thank you for agreeing to conduct this lecture for my participants. So over to you, Vivek.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharad, for a nice introduction. So let me first congratulate you on on organizing this FDP. I'm very much sure that this event will be a unique experience for all the participants, and they're going to enjoy each and every session during this event. I would also now like to wish you all a very happy Diwali. I know it's a weekend and also a Diwali, and on such a day to attend such an event, it shows your commitment to the technology in general. So let me wish you, a very healthy and prosperous Diwali from my side. So with this, I will start my talk. So the title of my talk is on embedded processors and operating system for Internet of Things. So there could have been several ways to deal with this title. One way could have been that I would have, selected one or two representative processor architecture and an operating system, and could have discussed them in detail, and talk more about their, what is the microarchitecture or the pipeline or whatever about the processor architecture is. But however, because we have a very diverse participants here, and also I think like all of us are faculty members, so to make this talk more interactive, also I thought that it would be much useful if we can discuss on the major challenges from the architecture and operating system level perspective, and also like what are the key research challenges out there. Okay, so this talk would be more in that particular sense, that we are going to understand what are the key requirements or expectation from the embedded processor and operating system, particularly for Internet of Things. Okay, so I cannot see the chat because I'm using the full screen. So probably I'll take your questions towards the end of the session. Okay, so you may please just maybe put it on the chat, but I'll try to answer it towards the end of the session. Okay. So Internet of Things. I mean, I believe you have a previous session from Sharad on Internet of Things. So by now you must have already learned a lot about Internet of Things, its scope and its challenges. And I don't know, but somehow I see some names familiar who might have attended the FDP on secure IoT at IIT Palakkad. So I believe you have some background on Internet of Things. But for people who are new, let me just say what Internet of Things in general means. Okay, so Internet of Things means several. It has a meaning to every individual in a different sense. For example, somebody is talking about smart home. For him, Internet of Things is about how you are going to connect your home appliances, home devices together to the net, and you can communicate through those devices, using internet and control them. Okay. For people who are talking about smart cities, they are talking about how you can make from street lights to smart transportation, all those things very, very effective, efficient, and which can improve the ease of life in this era. So basically, Internet of Things has a lot of meanings because it can be applied to several different applications which affects our daily lives. Okay, if you see this figure, if you see this diagram, let me just use a pointer. Uh, if we imagine this to be as a tree, we can see that the root, which is actually providing a fundamental, a strong, foundation to this tree, is basically depending upon the technology that we have. Okay, whether it is about sensing, whether it is about embedded processing or computing, or it is about connectivity, we have been over the period of time we have evolved so many different technologies, which is giving a fundamental strength to this tree in general. Software is like the trunk through which a different or several types of application can be served through IoT. And of course, to grow this tree, and keep it healthy, all kinds of optimization in terms of technology are happening over the period of time, as you can see what this cloud is trying to tell. With the evolution in technology, we are continuously innovating things and continuously improving the performance and other constraints under which typical IoT devices work. Okay. And it is true because it is actually using a lot of application. It can be applied to lot of applications. IoT is becoming pervasive. It is becoming, it is becoming part of our daily life in several aspects. Okay, and as a result, what we see is the IoT devices are increasing day by day. Okay, and if you see, this is a particular trend which shows that by 2020 there are approximately around 30 billion IoT devices which are active and exchanging data. Okay, and this number might be okay, because I've seen several other numbers with some suggesting about around 50 million or 60 million, 50 billion or 60 billion. But in general sense, what we are trying to express here is the fact that IoT devices are are becoming active exponentially. Okay, and generating a lot of data. Okay, so what the expectation, what the trend suggests is the expected amount of data which is going to get generated by these IoT devices is in petabytes. And most importantly, this is now becoming a $1 trillion economy. Okay, this is the impact of it is really significant on the economy. All aspects of what we see around us in terms of industry automation or healthcare or whatever, everyone is moving towards IoT. Okay, so we also need to understand why this thing is happening, why suddenly there is a sharp rise, and why these devices are increasing. What are the major factors which are feeding or fueling this kind of explosion in terms of IoT devices? Okay, so now one more thing that we also have to understand here is that IoT has several applications, from healthcare to smart city to industrial automation to assisted living to environment, automotive, or surveillance. Okay, but the unique thing is that all these kind of applications have, they are diverse in nature and they have unique computation requirements, and of course communication also, but they have a unique computation requirements. For example, if you talk about a healthcare application, maybe let's think about, for example, if you see in the figure below, if you see this particular figure, here you have, a person with a, with a visibility impairment, okay, and maybe he's using a smart cane. Okay. Now this kind of an application is particularly a very simple application, where simple in a sense that it has only one task to do, which is to allow the person with the visibility impairment to walk through the street and understand where are the hurdles, where are the problems while he's walking on the road. And now if you compare this compare this kind of an application to an application which is maybe a surveillance application, where where you are looking around, where you are capturing different videos and looking into for any intrusion or somebody who's trying to do some malicious work. Okay, both these kind of applications are very different. Both these kind of applications require different computing infrastructure. Both these kind of applications require different communication infrastructure in some sense, depending upon what is how the data is being transmitted, what is the rate of the transmission. All right. So what I'm trying to explain here is that all the applications where IoT in general is applied, the computation and the communication requirement can be very, very diverse and different. Okay. So the challenge here is that when you're talking about embedded processors or operating system or solutions or applications for IoT, you need to understand what is the domain in which you want to apply. And also, if you are trying to use some generic thing, then you need to ensure that all the key components which can allow a large scale interconnectivity between devices can be possible. Okay. So in a typical IoT application, these are the four stages. Okay. The first stage is basically data acquisition. The second stage could be data processing. Third stage, data storage, and fourth stage, data transmission. Now, all the application will definitely have data acquisition and data transmission stage, because the reason why we call it IoT is because we are trying to, interlink multiple devices who are going to send some data and then transmit that data. Okay. In some cases, they might be doing data processing and data storage as well. Okay. So for example, over here in this figure, what you can see is that for example, if you simply want to do a raw data transmission, okay, so probably don't in a real time raw data transmission, probably you don't have to do a lot of processing. You might even don't want to do any data storage. In fact, once you acquire the data from the endpoints, you can directly transmit that data. Okay, you can see this green arrow, what this is trying to show you. Similarly, if you are doing some data transmission which requires some sort of data storage, you don't want to do it right away, but you want to do it at a later point of time, or you want to do it with some interval, you can definitely store that data, right? So therefore, if you see this blue arrow, it shows that kind of an application. Similarly, you want to do some processing. Now you have some data, but you don't want to send all the data, but you want to use that data or maybe process the data, filter that data. Whatever you want to do with data, you are actually processing that data. So for that kind of an application, you might be using a particular data processing stage. Okay. And similarly, another application which might be using all the four stages of IoT applications. Okay. Now, when we're talking about these stages, the reason why I brought this thing in front of you is the fact that all the four stages of IoT applications require a lot of optimization from the hardware perspective as well as from the software perspective. So, for example, if I talk about data acquisition, right? So, if you're talking about data acquisition from the hardware perspective, we might want to think about how we can, do the sensing of data or the collection of samples in a low power manner, right? For example, we might want to use sensors which consume less power, like MEMS, or gyroscope or something, right? From the software perspective, we might want to understand that how frequently whether we need this data, okay? Because one thing I think by now you all must be knowing is the fact that IoT devices are essentially battery dependent devices, okay? We don't want to frequently go and change the batteries of these endpoints. we want them to do some sort of data collection in some regular intervals. And if that is the case, and we also want to ensure that it keep happening for a longer period of time. You don't want to, you don't want to be in a situation where you are facing, downtime because of all these things, right? So therefore, energy efficiency is a very, very critical aspect of IoT. And therefore, when we're talking about data acquisition, we have to identify measures which can allow sensing, which is intelligent sensing, which can be collecting data, at a required interval whenever you actually need the data. Okay, so similarly, when we talk about data processing, over here also there are going to be a lot of optimization in terms of hardware and software, right? For example, in terms of hardware, we might want to use a processor architecture or the embedded processor which consumes less power, right? You don't want to use a full-blown processor which whose power requirements are too high, right? Similarly, for data storage, people are working a lot on how the memory footprint and as well as new memory technologies can be developed, which can consume lesser power to store the data, right? Similarly, for data transmission, it is a very well-known fact that a lot of energy is consumed while transmitting data through IoT devices. Okay, so both hardware and software level interventions are required so that these data transmission can be made energy efficient. All right. Any questions till now? Okay. So as I mentioned, all stages require both hardware and software level optimizations. Now, if we see what are the major building blocks of an IoT system, it basically consists of devices which are going to sense some data. Okay, then there might be devices which are, or they're part of the sensing device which are going to communicate or transmit the data to some intermediate level where some processing is going to happen using that data. And then that middle layer is going to pass the data to the cloud for even more, compute intensive processing. But if you see in general, embedded computing is important at each and every layer of of the building blocks here. Okay, so essentially, embedded computing is at the heart of IoT. Embedded computing is the base which allows or which facilitates the computation or the efficiency that we are asking from the IoT system. All right. Sharad, am I audible? Sorry, somehow there is a.
Yes,
Oh,
you are
okay,
audible.
good. Thank you. All right. Okay, all right. All right. So now let's talk about what is the current scenario when we, in terms of the research on the, embedded computing part. Now, particularly with the growth that we have seen, in IoT and its impact to the society, since these devices are heavily, dependent on the communication, most of the research effort has been put on, designing applications and designing protocols for the communication or evolving new technologies for the communication. Embedded processors, which are at the core of this IoT systems, they have been sort of marginalized in terms of that. I mean, of course, there are research going on, but a lot of focus has majorly been on the communication part. What we see is with the evolution of IoT into fog computing or edge computing, the interest is that more and more computation should happen at the endpoint, right? Or the gateways. And if that is the case, then what we clearly see is that a lot of constraints are going to happen, or a lot of challenges are going to happen at the embedded computing platform as well. Okay. particularly with the microprocessors, they have to ensure that they can handle the growing computation and the memory demands of the application. Now, typically, more and more AI-based applications are now getting started to deployed on IoT subsystems. And if that is the case, then the computation requirement is also very, very high. So therefore, whatever the embedded processors that we are trying to use or the microcontrollers that we are trying to use at different stages, they need to guarantee that they can handle those kind of computation. At the same time, they have to maintain the connectivity, right? So you understand that power is a constraint. Power is already a major constraint because these devices are, battery operated. Now the problem is if you're doing a lot of heavy computations, then and you have a lot of memory demand or memory footprint, then how you are going to best utilize the power. Okay. At the same time, they have to maintain the connectivity as well as the, in some cases, real-time constraints. So if you're talking about, for example, the vehicular network, okay, we are talking about, connected vehicles. We are talking about interconnected vehicles which are talking to each other. Or we are talking about devices where, time is very, very critical. If you are unable to perform the task within the time, it may lead to a disastrous situation. In such cases, we have to ensure that the microprocessors we are talking about can ensure and deliver these kind of functionalities. Okay. Let me now run just a video for you. I'm not trying to give any propaganda of Intel or anything. This is just a video which I just wanted to show you, and then I'll talk about why I wanted to show you this video. Okay. Please just watch this.
Vivek, I think you need to share your system audio.
Oh, just one second. Okay.
So you share the presentation one more time. Then at the top, you will see include system audio.
Okay, let me just do that. Yeah, I'm doing it. Just one second.
Yeah.
Is it visible now?
Yes.
Okay.
IoT is transforming business and rapidly increasing technological demands. To push business forward, we need new processors optimized for high-performance computing. Introducing 11th Gen Intel Core processors. New silicon enhanced for the IoT needs of today and tomorrow. By combining CPU, GPU, and AI, these processors deliver breakthrough performance in a low-power platform while consolidating multiple workloads. They include high-powered Intel Iris Xe graphics equipped with up to 96 execution units, so you can stream, process, and analyze multiple video channels simultaneously. And 2 video decode boxes allow the capture of up to 40 1080p streams. These 11th Gen processors include the next leap forward in AI acceleration, delivering AI inferencing and computer vision in a single architecture. And real-time computing minimizes cycle times and latency for edge applications, making it ideal for time-critical performance. 11th Gen processors are specifically designed to meet the IoT demands of commercial and industrial applications. IoT is shaping the business needs of today. And together with the 11th Gen Intel Core processors, you can build the business solutions of tomorrow.
All right. So the main reason why I wanted to show this video for you is the fact I just wanted to suggest that whatever we discussed in the previous slide about what are the key features that the modern microprocessor should ensure so that the growth of IoT can be maintained are all have been discussed here in this video as well. When they're promoting their new architecture, they're talking about low power, they're talking about higher performance. That means they are essentially trying to tell that they are going to address the needs or the computation need of the modern application like AI based applications, which maybe require more and more hardware, but at the same time they all are working with the enough power what is required to use that, right? So what I'm trying to say is that these are the critical challenges that the microprocessors have to address so that they can foster the growth of IoT and actually provide the performance that we are expecting from the modern IoT applications. Now, similar to Intel, just one second. ARM also has a lot of processors which can be used for different IoT applications. So, for example, you have the ARM Cortex-A family, where the processors are rich and they can be basically used for the IoT gateways. You have ARM Cortex-M family processors, which may range from a very simple 8-bit MCU to a 32-bit processor, which can 32-bit microcontroller, which can be used for the endpoint devices. Okay, so these are some of the state-of-the-art architectures and processor families which can be used when you are planning to design your IoT application or IoT network. Now, beside this, very recently, RISC-V has got a lot of traction. RISC-V is another, processor architecture, which is again based on the RISC type of system, reduced instruction set computers, and these systems are also getting a lot of traction. The advantage with RISC-V is it's completely open source. So now the point is, let me just rephrase it here. The point is, we understand that IoT is transforming a lot of applications around, a lot of things around us. They have become a part of our daily lives. You can find their application in so many ways around us. Okay. We also understand that embedded processing or embedded computing is at the heart of IoT. Okay. We also understand that these embedded processors, which are doing a lot of processing, they need to ascertain that they should be able to handle the computational requirement of the modern applications. They should be able to work under the operational constraints like the thermal efficiency and the energy budgets, and at the same time they should also maintain the connectivity. So that means they should have sufficient power and and a good power management that can allow all these things to happen. Okay. I also discussed about what are some of the state-of-the-art systems that we can see around what Intel is doing or what ARM is doing or what RISC-V is doing in terms of that. But the point is, when we are looking into at the implementation level, the point is, where are we going to use this system and how are we going to use this system? This all depends upon how we are actually doing the computation. We know that IoT devices are going to generate a lot of data, or in fact, it's a big data, right? They're going to generate a lot of data. Now, at which stage and how we want to compute or process this data makes a lot of difference. Okay, this makes a lot of difference in terms of what kind of a performance we are looking into. Okay, so therefore, there are different IoT computing layers where, depending upon what our requirements are, we can do the data processing. All right. One of the biggest challenge with the big data is how are we going to store this massive data? All right. And of course, the computation power and the high latency, because we have to transmit this data. So all these things makes a real challenge for the computation. Now, based on this, this necessitates the migration of computation and processing to different underlying computing layers available in the IoT chain. Okay. So here on the right hand side, the figure which you can see essentially is trying to show you different layers of computation, okay, where you can process the data. Okay. So one way could be that you do all the computation at the device, okay, where you do a lot of computation in the device. The other way could be that you want to do a lot of computation at the gateway, okay, and or maybe you want to do you just want to collect the data through your endpoints. You want to just transmit through the gateways, and most of the processing of the data you want to do it at the cloud. Okay, so through this we actually form different computing layers. And as you can see, how the latency, resources, and predictability changes when you are moving from one computing layer to the other computing layer. All right. So let me just give you a little bit more into what we mean by the computing layers. So computing layers can be divided into 4 or 5. In general, they can be divided into 4 and 5 types. The first one could be a device-centric approach, where the microcontroller on the device can be exploited to perform the computation. Okay. The main challenge is if the endpoint device that we're talking about is just having a microcontroller with limited resources, then running or doing a lot of computation is going to be very, very difficult. Okay. Somebody message, yeah, could not see the PPT.
So is there anyone else who could not see the PPT? You can raise your hand. There is a hand button next to the raise hand button next to the chat box. Okay, I think you can continue, Vivek.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, other than okay, so what you can do and see, you can leave the meeting and join again. You will be able to see the okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the second layer that we can talk about is the gateway-centric layer, gateway-centric computing layer, where IoT gateway devices can be used to, they can be used to do a lot of processing. Now, these gateway devices could be a smartphone, or it could be any other system which have sufficient, resources so that it can maintain the connectivity between different kinds of heterogeneous, computing devices. All right. Of course, the key challenge here is that to guarantee the availability and deadline constraint, could be quite difficult. All right. The third way is to do which is a very recent buzzword is about fog-centric. That means where you want to do a lot of computation between the endpoint and the clouds. Okay, so you don't want to do a lot of computation at the cloud, because to do a computation at the cloud, you have to transmit a lot of data. So that means it is going to affect the latency over there. At the same time, you don't want to do everything at the endpoint, because then the resource and the power is a challenge. So you want to do all this computation in between, such that you can, do better in terms of both latency and the computational power. Okay. Fourth one, of course, is about the cloud-centric, where you want to do a lot of computation on the cloud. The challenge is about the latency and the bandwidth and the availability. Okay. Now, all these things are important, and why I'm discussing all these things is for the reason, because when tomorrow as a designer, when you are planning to implement some application through IoT devices, you need to really understand where and how you want to deploy your computation, and how you want to distribute your computation. Okay, and it definitely depends upon the type of application you're talking about. Okay, so therefore it's once you understand what are the kind of processor architectures are available out there that you can use, you also need to understand at which layer you want to do or focus more of your computation. Whether you want to do a fog approach, or you want to do a cloud-centric approach, or you want to do a device-centric approach, whatever that case is, you need to understand it very well. Okay. Now the point is, when we are talking about fog or cloud or whatever, the point is what kind of systems are we going to use over there, right? So there are, of course, I talked about Intel, that particular processor. I mean, I showed that video. I also talked about ARM processor family. The challenge here, what you need to understand is what is the limitation of using such systems, and how you can actually, use them so that you can actually achieve a better performance and better energy, efficiency. So here in this diagram, what we are trying to show you is, a comparison between different type of system, ASIC, FPGA, GPU, CGRAs, DSP, and multi-cores. And we're trying to show that in terms of flexibility, in terms of energy efficiency, how you can, arrange those things. Okay. Similarly, in terms of performance and energy efficiency, how you can, see these different kind of systems. And based on your requirement, you can then probably try to choose that at which, stage of your system, what kind of, which stage of your IoT, which kind of a system you would like to use. Okay. For example, in terms of energy efficiency, ASICs are the best, but of course the flexibility is limited. You have FPGAs, which may be slightly less energy efficient than ASIC, but give you a slightly more flexibility. It can give you reconfigurability. Now, a new term of CGRAs have come in, which are coarse-grained reconfigurable architectures, right? There are GPUs, there are DSPs, there are multi-cores, and there are CPUs. So based on the requirement, you need to identify and then use this system accordingly, so that you can, achieve the kind of performance and the efficiency that you are looking from a particular application that you're trying to implement. Okay. Now the point is that till now, whatever we have talked about, we have talked mostly about, first of all, why performance is important, and also how these systems, vary in terms of performance and energy efficiency. One fundamental question is that what are the key reasons which have fueled, this explosion in IoT devices? What are the fundamental reasons why these devices are energy constrained? What are the reasons why it is important that whenever we are designing these IoT devices, we have to ensure that power, energy, and thermal efficiency can be maintained in these kind of devices, right? So to understand that, I think we need to go back and understand what has happened at the technology level. Okay. So from 1970 till now and in the future, what we are clearly seeing that the technology node or the transistor sizes has, scaled down in an exponential manner, right? This is what Moore's law you must be all be familiar with, right? So if you see on the left hand side, we can see how the size of the CMOS transistors has scaled down significantly in an exponential manner from 1970 till now, and what the trend we expect in the future as well. Okay. And now it depends upon how much they can hold, but till now it has been, mostly able to hold the trend. As a result of this technology scaling, what we have seen is that more and more transistors can be combined together in a single chip. If you are able to integrate more and more transistors together, that means you are able to give more and more hardware functionality, or the hardware on the same chip. As a result, you can manage more and more complex applications. Okay. So the fundamental reason why we are actually able to have so many, IoT devices which are now able to do a lot of computation is the fact that we are able to integrate a lot of transistors together so that we can have more and more hardware units. So if you remember from the Intel side, what they have shown is like they have 96, extra processing units, which can allow a lot of AI-based computation to happen, which can allow a lot of parallel image computation to happen, right? But the problem here is that even though the transistor size scaled down in an exponential manner, the power consumed by these transistors didn't scale at that same rate. Okay, as a result, what we have seen is ideally our expectation is that if you're scaling down the transistor, the power consumption should also scale, down accordingly. But instead, what we have seen is now, since we are integrating more and more transistors together, we have seen that the power consumption of the chip is also increasing, and most importantly, the power density is increasing significantly. Okay, and the increase in power density here is because of the fact that the rate by which you are scaling down the processor is not same as the rate at which we are scaling down the power of a particular transistor. Okay, or the power supply of the particular transistor. As a result, the power density keeps on increasing. Now, if we have a higher power density, then of course what we are looking into is a higher chip temperature. Okay, so basically what we see here is essentially high power leads to higher temperature. And since we are scaling down these transistors because of the device physics of these transistors, what we see is a lot of leakage power consumption happening. Okay, so what is the difference between the leakage power and the other power or the dynamic power that we're talking about? Dynamic power essentially means the power which has been consumed when we are doing some useful work. Leakage power is a power which has been consumed when nothing was happening. Okay, so definitely leakage power is something that we don't want, and we also want to reduce the dynamic power. Okay, so here what we're trying to say, I have written this high power. High power is basically the summation of both dynamic power and the leakage power. So what we are trying to suggest here is that when you are doing a lot of computation, okay, since as you can see the power density is increasing tremendously, we have a higher chip temperature. Higher chip temperature leads to higher leakage power, and this higher leakage power adds back to the overall power consumption. As a result, the temperature increases again. So this is like a positive feedback loop which has been created between the power consumption, leakage power consumption, and the temperature. Okay. Now, as a result, what happens is these systems are subjected to high temperature. Therefore, we have to provide them with a better packaging and cooling solution. Now, if you believe on what is the uh, okay, so if you see what are the you know what are the challenges, particularly when we talk about in terms of IoT, the problem is they are they are running on battery, right? If they are running on battery, that means they have limited power supply. And now if because of this high temperature and power, if we're consuming more and more power, that means the chances are the battery life is also going to reduce significantly. One more challenge what we have seen here is that if you compare the battery technology and the processor technology, they have also evolved in a very different rate. In fact, in a very significant rate. There has been a very small improvement in the battery technology compared to the processor technology, right? So now the impact of this temperature, what we see is high packaging and cooling cost. At the same time, it also affects the lifetime reliability. When I say lifetime reliability, what I essentially means is about their operational lifetime. So due to the temperature impacts, different physical phenomena happens on the chip, which can, for example, electromigration, which basically sort of induces resistance on the power and on the power rails. As a result, what happens? The power supply to the cores continues to reduce, and therefore, if the power supply to the cores reduces, that means the performance that they can deliver cannot be achieved. For example, at a voltage of 1 volts, you are actually giving a frequency of, for example, let's say 300 megahertz. Now, since you are trying to reduce now this resistance which is happening on the interconnect or on the power rails because of the electromigration, you might not be able to supply 1 volt. In fact, you might be supplying much lesser, power to it. As a result, the expected performance of maybe no, whatever that 3 megahertz is, you are actually not able to achieve that. You might be running or you might be operating at a very low frequency. Okay, so these impacts have a strong relation to the performance, right? Particularly in the case of IoT, this thing worsen up because of its dependency on the battery, and also we don't want these systems, to run out of battery power soon. So we want those systems to run as long as possible, right? These are separate from your typical mobile phones, where it's okay to change mobile phone in 1 year or 2 year. But if you are implementing a very large IoT network, you don't. It's not easy and not feasible to change things, at a very shorter intervals. Okay. So the key challenge is what I'm trying to emphasize here is the fact that because of higher integration of transistors on the chip, you are able to achieve higher computational power on the chip. But what it leads to is the power and thermal constraints, which affect the performance and the cost of packaging and cooling. Okay. Now, the thing is, how can we deal with this? Okay, how can we deal with this? So there are research going on at different design abstraction levels. Okay, so there are people who are working on improving the battery life. There are people who are working on, looking into how the circuits can be designed with, power reduction features. For example, having a sleep transistor or some technology that can help to reduce the power consumption on the chip. Uh, but out of all the abstraction levels, in fact, all the abstraction levels are important. But in my understanding, what I believe is if you try to implement, techniques from the system level perspective or the operating system level perspective, they tend to be more effective. For example, if you are able to identify a better task mapping strategy, okay, then you can actually reduce the number of hotspots on the chip where they're happening. If you are able to reduce, for example, if from the system level, if you can identify how and how frequently you want to sense, the data, or if you can actually identify how and when you want to store data in the memory. In all those cases, and in which location you want to store the data in the memory, in all those cases, you can actually do a lot of savings in terms of power and energy. Okay. So I have one, yeah. So of course, and these things become even more critical when you're talking about the safety critical systems, because for example, if because of the temperature, if the reliability becomes a major issue, in the safety critical system, it can be disastrous, right? Right. So it can be very, very critical. Even in the non-safety critical systems, the reliability challenges can actually lead to a loss, in terms of cost. It can be really, really expensive. Okay. For example, if in a data center, if there are a lot of downtimes because of the reliability issues in the IoT network, which is collecting different, sensing different parameters within the data center, what you see is that you can end up with a lot of downtime, right? Okay. So at this end, maybe I can just discuss a little bit about one of my recent work. This work is basically, this work is published in ICCD this year itself. And this work is basically about thermal aware reliability, lifetime reliability optimization for automotive distributed computing application. So basically, in this particular work, I really encourage you to please go and check this paper. So in this particular work, what we have considered is an automotive application where different electronic control units. So you must be knowing that in a typical car, what we see, there are easily several microcontrollers or electronic control units which are essentially looking after different operations within the car, whether it is ABS or whether it is infotainment system or engine control. All these things, or onboard diagnosis, all these things are basically controlled by the electronic control units. So the point is, if in a car, if these electronic control units are subjected to harsh environment, and also a lot of computations are happening on those chips, then they might be subjected to high temperature, resulting in reliability challenges. And if these chips are subjected to reliability challenges, then what essentially means is their operational lifetime is going to get reduced significantly. And now changing these parts is not simple, right? And particularly when we are talking about a scenario where the cars are going to get connected, when we are talking about self-driving car, reliability becomes a very significant challenge. In fact, there are certain compliances that the car makers have to ensure so that reliability challenges can be addressed during the manufacturing phase as well. Okay. So the thing is, in this particular paper, what we have tried to develop is an algorithm that can basically allow you to identify what is going to be the maximum temperature when you are running a certain application on a system or ECO system which are interacting through a CAN bus, which is just like a broadcasting network. Okay, so in this work, what we have tried to show through analytical formulations is the fact that as long as you can guarantee or bound the peak temperature of the application, you can also guarantee the operational lifetime of the system. Okay, so in this paper, we have sort of developed some analytical methodology to bound the temperature or to estimate the temperature and also accurately estimate the operational lifetime of the ECU. Okay, so this is I just wanted to give you how I'm doing some sort of research in this direction when we are looking into these electronic control units and trying to see that for a typical automobile application, how we can improve the lifetime reliability of the processors. Okay. With this, probably I would like to stop my discussion on the embedded processor side. If you have any questions, you may please feel free to ask now.
So we will take questions one by one. So currently I have a few questions in the chat box. So the first one is, what are the techniques currently used for saving the battery life in IoT devices?
Yeah, so there are several techniques actually. Okay, so as I mentioned, first is what kind of battery are we trying to use. So if you just go and search for what kind of the batteries that can be used, what kind of technologies that we are talking about, whether it is a 60 cell or other kind of cells, you can check how these can be used effectively. Most importantly, if you want to improve the battery efficiency or the battery life in an IoT device, you need to identify how you can improve the energy which is being consumed either for computation or communication. Okay, from a system level perspective, okay, whatever the application that you are trying to run on that particular IoT device, you might want to design that application in an energy efficient manner. Okay, for example, let's say if you think about, okay, this particular gateway or something is running an operating system. Okay, and this particular operating system might be now a lot of task has come to this particular system. Now the point is, what is the priority of those tasks? How, in which order those tasks should be executed? What frequency of operation should be used so that these tasks can be operated? Okay. Another thing is when we're talking about the endpoint, then how frequently you want to do the sensing. Okay. For example, if I want to collect the weather information, right? I definitely don't want to collect that information. For example, the temperature, of the temperature outside. Okay. I don't want to. It is not necessary that I collect the temperature very often. I maybe collect that temperature, in a very, in an interval which is longer enough so that I don't have to on my sensing device all the time. Okay. Then another thing is, so there are other, besides this, there are other, sensing techniques like compress sensing, which has, really become very interesting in terms of healthcare applications, right? More other than this, now what kind of architectures that you can use? So whether you want to use ASIC, whether you want to use CGRAs, whichever that can deliver a better energy efficiency that can help you to reduce the battery life. or improve the battery life.
Okay. So can we move to the next question, Vivek?
Yeah, please.
Okay,
I
so
hope
next.
I've answered what the.
Yeah, so you have covered most of the points, high-level points for saving battery life, and in some of the sessions tomorrow onwards, this will be covered in a little bit more detail as well.
Sure.
Okay, so the next question is, I think this is a very factual question, I would say, is to how many maximum nodes can be connected in a CAN bus?
Now, CAN bus essentially is a, it's a broadcast network. Okay. And honestly, I don't have in my mind what is the maximum that we can connect. I don't have that information on the top of my head, but I don't see a lot of, constraint in that sense. Because this is a broadcast network, so I don't see a lot of limitation in that sense. But
Professor
probably
Sharad,
I don't.
can I answer?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, Ashishji, please.
So that actually he's right. It's a broadcast bus, but it depends upon the capacitance that the transceiver can drive on the bus. So typical value is 32.
Okay, yeah. I don't,
So
sort of.
the loading of the transceiver versus the driving capability of the transceiver, and I think I'll cover that tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Great.
So 32 is a typical answer. You can use bridges further. CAN bridges are also possible. So if you use a better transceiver, and then you can, you have to look at the characteristics of the transceiver. Essentially, is the answer. Typically being 32. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, there is another question, Vivek, which is design tools involving processor technology. So I think what he means is design tools for designing processors.
I think probably ARM will be covering this aspect.
No.
Something on the embed and other things.
They are talking about protocols and other things there.
Okay. So, yeah, maybe would you like to answer on this, Sharad?
Okay, I will answer this question. So essentially, processor design tools mean there are two ways in which you can design a processor. Okay, the design part, which is the front end part, where once you have created the architecture of your processor, like what kind of blocks it will have, fetch, decode, execute blocks, how many stages in the pipeline, how many pipelines themselves, whether single scalar pipeline or vector pipeline or super scalar pipeline. Once you have created this architecture, you can describe this architecture in any hardware description language, either VHDL or Verilog. And then from there onwards, it's for you to prototype it on the FPGA, or if you are interested in doing it on an ASIC, then you have to use ASIC design tools. So ASIC design tools are available from Cadence, from Synopsys. These companies, FPGA prototyping tools are available from Xilinx. From Xilinx is now AMD, from Altera, which is now Intel. And there are also other ways of if you're doing research, or if you want to just try out for a teaching point of view, you can download open source, and Vivek would know about these processors much more. Open source software processors like Xilinx Microblaze or Intel Neos, and you can put them on an FPGA and you can play around with the blocks and see how it works. But to do any of those tasks, you have to be at least familiar with the digital logic design and digital system design concepts, and at least some degree of familiarity with either Verilog or VHDL would be good. Right, Vivek?
Yeah. Perfect. Yes. Okay, maybe I didn't understand the question. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I thought he's talking about something else. Yeah, so of course,
So
yeah, again, it's
Ashish,
yeah.
if you are there, so I'll forward this question to Ashish ji. Is it so? By the way, for the guests here, We have Mr. Ashish Kovelkar with us. He is a Senior Director for High Performance Computing at CDAC Pune.
Oh, wonderful.
And he is very experienced also in processor architectures and HPC computing. So tomorrow, the second session is being taken by him. So the CAN related question was answered by him. So there is another CAN related question, which is it common for 32 nodes forward both 11-bit identifier as well as 29-bit identifier of CAN bus?
The answer is, I think yes, but I will check on this and let you know, because it is the identifier is independent of the number of nodes, because as I said, number of nodes, I give 32 as an answer because one that you use, the most common one, MCP2501 from Microchip, that can drive 32, but Philips may have a different. So that's why I said look at the loading characteristics of the transceiver, and if you mix the transceiver, then you have to take the one that can drive the lowest. So having said that, this identifier is in the packet, so that is identifiers, that is, I don't think there is a relationship between the two, because it's content of the packet. So whatever version of the packet that you choose, based on that you will have the number of identifiers. So yes, the answer is yes, they are independent of each other.
Okay.
Anyway, I will confirm that tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Ashish.
Actually, CAN was not in the list that you have given, but I include that. I don't mind including.
Yeah, actually it came because I think of this paper, I guess.
So
no, what I'm saying is in tomorrow's the description that you have given, there is SPI, I2C and others, but CAN was not there, but I can share details about CAN.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Vivek, because you talked about your work, so there is some more question based on your work. Number one is hardware software co-design in vehicle control system. How do you do that?
Yeah, actually, this is something which is still not, at a stage where we can confirmly say that, that can be possible, because these systems are like, the real-time constraints are really important here. Okay. So, to some systems which are like infotainment system and others, people are working on the hardware software co-design part, but most of the ECUs that you see are like very basic microcontrollers. So, which typically, are like quite traditional in sense. But still, a lot of work is still going on in that direction.
Okay. One thing perhaps, Vivek, you can share with the participants here is the tools that you use for, like some of the open source tools that you use for thermal simulation and temperature hotspot and those kind of tools.
Yeah, sure. I think, if you are working, in understanding what is the impact of, thermal, the thermal challenges on processor architecture, hotspot is one tool which allows you to do a lot of analysis. Okay, the advantage is, you can do it at a very different abstraction level at hotspot. Okay, so you can move from a single processing unit to a granularity of a core or a microprocessor directly. So essentially what it does is, based on the size of the chip that you're talking about or the dimension of the processor, it basically generates the resistance and capacitance metrics for that. And then based on whatever the power consumption that you're talking about by each unit, it helps you to understand what is going to be the transient as well as the steady state temperature for that. Another advantage of using hotspot is, first of all, it is written in C, C++, so you can easily go and change things that you wanted to modify for your own personal use. For example, the standard hotspot does not have a leakage model in that. Okay, and typically with the scaling down of the transistors, leakage has become a very significant problem. So you can actually go and alter the leakage model based on whatever the current technology trend you're talking about. For example, if you are designing or if you are estimating for a processor with 65 tech node or 32 tech node or whatever that node is, based on that you can actually modify the leakage model and the power consumption model, and so that you can get a better estimation of the temperature. One more advantage of using a hotspot is that it can actually easily it can easily get integrated with, other architecture level tools like Simple Scaler, Gem5, or Sniper Sim, whichever you are using for the simulations.
Okay, there is one more question, Vivek, which is, can you throw some light on hardware security, basically hardware trojans in IoT?
It's one of the very important issue, with the IoT devices, and a lot of techniques people try to use to avoid, from the hardware side, whether it is side channel attacks, from the application side, whether it is cryptography. So people are coming with ways so that they can have some secure codes which can look after all these, attacks. And particularly this third party IP has become a very significant concern when we're talking about the Trojans. Okay. So, for example, I think a few years back there was some allegation on Huawei that whatever the chip they are sending is trying to steal a lot of information from the users. Particularly, therefore, I think US or some other country sort of banned Huawei chips in between. So the thing is, most of the companies, they are fabless companies. Okay, so now when they send their chips to be made to a different in a fabrication facility, there's a lot of chance that it may end up with having hidden trojans, which may be stealing information or impacting your processing or affecting your computation. Okay, so there have been several methods which talk about how to identify these third party IPs. Okay, for example, you can look into what are the system level calls. For example, if you're running an application, you can create a graph or the map of what kind of system applications or system calls expected out of this particular application. Similarly, there are also ways where because, for example, there's a safety critical system. Okay, and so people tend to apply the fault tolerance methodologies even to deal with this third party IPs, because if there is a Trojan which is not, maybe not stealing your information, but it is trying to impact the system performance, you might want to run the same application on two different cores or two different units just to ensure that even if it is running on a core with some Trojan, the other one can complete the task in a proper manner. So of course there is a standard benchmarking for that. But this is again a very important issue, and a lot of work is going on in this direction. So if you just go on to Google Scholar and if you write third-party IP detection and all those things, you'll see a lot of paper on that particular direction. Particularly, you can see papers from I think Sanjay Curry from I forgot his name, from I think University of Waterloo or Toronto somewhere. So there's a lot of work on that direction. Okay, so yeah, can I go ahead? Sharad, can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Vivek.
Okay. So after talking about the processor, now it's the time to talk about the operating systems, right? So of course, IoT being power constrained, energy constrained device, with the expectation to do a lot of work, like ensuring connectivity and all. Of course, operating system is again a very important issue to deal with. Okay, so basically, if you want to just divide the or classify the IoT devices, we can sort of classify them into basically two different categories. One we could call as the high-end devices. That means these devices are devices which have enough resources to run our traditional operating system like Linux. Okay, so for example, you have Raspberry Pi board where you run something like a Raspbian. You have smartphones. You have Android boards where you can run Linux or Windows or whatever. So these are high-end devices. Let me we can classify that way. The other way is the low-end devices where the resources are really, really restricted, where you don't have enough, sufficient memory. And as a result, what you want is to ensure that the footprint of the operating system and the application which are going to run on them are going to be really, really less. So when we talk about low-end devices, we are talking about devices which are essentially, we have like, memory in KBs, okay? When we're talking about high-end devices, we're talking of devices which may go from, in gigabytes to terabytes and whatever, okay? So in this talk, we don't have much time. So in this talk, I'm just going to talk a little bit on the low-end IoT OS for low-end IoT devices. I'm just quickly going to talk about what are the major expectations from these kind of operating systems, and what are the open source operating system already available out there, which you can easily use, modify, because those are all mostly open source, and use it for the system that you are trying to build. Okay. So basically, the major requirement for the low-end IoT devices, low-end IoT OS, is basically the first important is the small memory footprint. We don't want OS to be too large. We don't want OS to be occupying a lot of space. At the same time, the application that we are trying to run should also occupy lesser memory. Okay. So OS and application developers have to ensure that these software can work efficiently within the constrained memory. The second important challenge is for the support for heterogeneous hardware. Now we're talking about IoT, where you are basically interconnecting with a lot of different kind of devices. So whichever the OS you're talking about should provide that support to the heterogeneity. Okay. So essentially, you have devices which are based on different MCUs, you have devices which are based on different, which might be communicating through different protocols. So the operating system, whichever you are trying to run, must provide different kind of support for these different kind of connectivities. All right. Third important challenge here is about the network connectivity. We have to ensure that these IoT devices can continuously interconnect and communicate. They must have different network interfaces. They should allow, they should essentially have those network or protocol stacks so that those interconnectivities can be maintained. Okay. So the key requirement for a generic OS for the IoT is thus to support heterogeneous link layer technologies and a network stack protocol for relevant IoT. So one more thing I must also mention here is that these these OS should also work towards they should be inclusive enough to allow a lot of, particularly if we are talking about a scenario where there's going to be a lot of heterogeneity, then we are definitely want to have them to have more and more protocol stack on these OS. Then of course some of the applications require real time. So these OS, if the application requires, they should also have the the support for real time constraint. That means they should ensure that whatever the applications are running on those OS should finish on time, and should whatever the required performances can be delivered without causing any disastrous situation. Okay. Security, of course, OS security is a major challenge in IoT. Security can be through, at different abstraction level. It could be on network, it could be on device, and it's important that, people, we should have the cryptographic libraries. I mean, this OS should support cryptographic libraries, authentication protocols. Okay. These OS should also ensure in a sense that there can be some some way to detect malware. There can be some ways to detect the vulnerabilities of the application which are trying to run on this OS. So therefore the security can be maintained in these operating systems for low-end IoTs. Okay. Sorry, I'm just quickly going through it. In case you have a question, I'll be more than happy to answer. And last but not the least, the important part is energy efficiency. So since these devices are constrained by the energy resources, it's important that we whatever these OS are, they should be energy efficient. Energy efficient in a sense, for example, when you are implementing a scheduling policy in this OS, those scheduling policies can basically lead up to a better task balancing or load balancing strategies that can improve the energy efficiency. If you're talking about the operating frequency, if a technique like DVFS is possible, then probably one should implement DVFS, dynamic voltage and frequency scaling through OS, which can control what type of operating frequency you want to use for a certain application. If we talk about different sleep modes for different sensing, that can also be implemented with the help of the OS. All right. So a key requirement for OS for IoT is to provide energy saving options to the upper layer and to make use of these functions as much as possible. All right. Now, if we want to see these OSs in terms of their programmability, okay, these OS can be divided into three different types. One is basically they can be divided into event-driven operating systems, and these are the most common approaches for these type of networks, where basically we are talking about whenever there is an event, only then certain action should happen. Okay, the key idea of this model is that okay. The key idea of this model is that all the processing on the system should be triggered by the external event. Okay. Now the challenge here is that with this system, it's not very easy to program, and moreover, not every application can be abstracted through a finite state machine. Okay. So therefore, it becomes very difficult that sometimes for a programmer that they can write a program for this kind of an OS. But however, in any case, for IoT, event-driven operating systems are quite common, particularly for the low-end devices. And here I have given some examples, which are Contiki and TinyOS. These are all open source operating systems. You can find, under the BSD license, you can find the source code in the GitHub libraries. You can use these operating systems. And also there are certain simulators which allows you, there are other debugging tools which are available with these OS that you can use to, modify the source code and use it based on your requirements. Another type of the OS is the multi-threading OS. This is the traditional approach for most modern OS, okay, where the thread runs in its own context and manages its own stack. So in the previous case, the idea is resources are going to be shared. For example, the stack between different threads are going to be shared. Okay. However, in this case, they don't typically share the thread. As a result, a lot of memory overheads come in terms of on these kind of operating systems. Okay. The third type is the pure RTOS. These kind of operating systems for low-end IoT devices are essentially planned to ensure the real-time constraints for the application. Okay, and one of the key challenge here is that they have to provide libraries for formal verification and standardization, which are very crucial. Okay. As a result, it becomes a lot of constraints on a developer to sort of create application for these kind of operating systems, because they have to ensure that proper design can be created, proper application can be designed, which can ultimately be verified through model checking or formal verification or regressions, whatever that manner is. But they can ensure the real-time real-time constraints of the application. Okay, here there are again examples I've provided, which are FreeRTOS, okay, and other things. And among all, I think FreeRTOS is something which is being used very, mostly people try to use FreeRTOS. Okay. Now this is a comparison between all these operating systems in terms of whether they, what kind of category they are, whether they are event-driven or multi-threading or real-time. Whether they have any RTOS or the real-time scheduler in that, whether do they give you the connectivity with the low PAN 6LoWPAN, okay, which is the IPv6 protocol for the resource constrained devices. Then what kind of a RAM requirement is there, whether it can work within the RAM of less than 32 KB. Whether does it require a memory management unit or not. Okay, so all these kinds give you a comparison and tells you about how efficiently, or how you can use this kind of operating system for your particular case, depending upon what are the requirements. Okay. So yeah, I think with this I would like to conclude this talk here, because I think we have already completed the time. So in this talk, basically, I have sort of tried to cover that why IoT is pervasive and how it is impacting several aspects of our daily life. Why embedded computing is at the heart of IoT, and what are the key challenges this embedded computing or embedded processors and software should ensure for IoT applications. Uh, for example, embedded processors need to cater, the increasing computing and communication demands. At the same time, they need to work under the, constraints of low energy budget and temperature. Similarly, the performance demands on the system addresses, enormous. So they're going to do a lot of data generation. Then how are we going to distribute the data across the different, the building blocks of IoT? Actually helps you to understand how efficiently you can do do the computation on IoT. And definitely OS plays a very critical role depending upon the memory footprint, energy efficiency, how can these OS can contribute to the IoT ecosystem. And I think I've also given you so many examples of OS which are freely available, and I encourage you to please go and try those source codes and see how you can use it for your particular use. If you are doing research, you can simply use them to understand different behaviors. So with this, I would like to thank you all, and maybe if you have any questions, I can try to answer.
So if there are any questions on operating systems for IoT.
One more thing I just would like to say, in case, if you are unable to ask your questions now, I will be more than happy if you can email your questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer. So let me just give you just a very quick thing on this, that, I do a lot of research from the system level perspective on improving the, the performance, energy, and thermal efficiency of the systems, improving the reliability of the systems. And also, I'm doing, recently been doing a lot of research on malware detections and the software vulnerability detections. Okay, so in case if you're someone who is planning to do a research in this area, in any of the mentioned area, please do not hesitate to just email me your interest, and maybe we can have a more elaborate discussion from there.
Yeah, so just to add on to what Vivek said, if you're working in an institution nearby Palakkad, so in Coimbatore or such areas, you can also consider doing a part-time PhD at IIT Palakkad.
Yeah. I think I should have taken a longer session, Sharad. I think it's very difficult because these are very broad topics, and it's difficult to narrow down for a 1.5 hour session. So I hope I could have given you some useful information, but I am very much open. If you have anything that you can always email me, and we can take the discussion from there.
So Vivek, there is one question, like one case study, especially in vehicle control system that does some hardware software co-design. So if you have any reference material you can share with me, I'll share with the participants.
Okay, sure. That I can do. Yeah, that I can definitely do. In fact, I would also like to tell you that, I have provided references for all, whatever the material I have put in this slide, right? So you can always go and check those references. You can get a lot more information from there. So I just sort of, picked something which I felt is important to discuss, but there are a lot more details that you might want to, go through, through those papers. And also a lot of, whatever my publications are actually available on my webpage at IIT Palakkad. You can please go through it, and if you have anything that you want to, add on or, discuss, I'll be more than happy to do that.
So just to remind everyone, the PowerPoint slides will be available. I will share that with you. by tomorrow. The YouTube links will also be shared. They may be slightly delayed because we may need to edit the videos a bit and then upload on the YouTube channel. But the PowerPoint slides will be made available to you definitely by tomorrow. So if no further questions, so I should thank Vivek. Thank you, Vivek, a lot. Thanks a lot, Vivek, for having conducted this session. And it was quite interesting to know about embedded processors and operating systems. Generally, we learn only about Windows and Linux. Nobody talks about IoT OS. So for people to at least hear the phrases and the names of the operating systems, I think that is interesting. That's a good starting point to learn more.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Sharad.
So yeah, thanks a lot, Vivek. Now for the participants, I have a message. I will share the attendance link one more time. If you have already filled it up, you don't need to fill it up again. Okay, because this link that I am sharing with you now, the link is not per session. This is for a day. Per session, I can download from Google, not from Google, but from Microsoft Teams itself. Okay, but so that I don't miss anyone, I'm asking you to fill up the form. Okay. Per session, I will downloading directly automatically from this MS Teams application. You just fill up the form once in the day. That will be sufficient. Okay. And every night I will send you the links for the next day's sessions. So for tomorrow's sessions, I will send you the links by tonight. Okay. So you can join tomorrow. The schedule remains as it is, and we'll tomorrow onwards we'll try to follow it as per the schedule as much as possible. So with that, thank you everyone. Happy Diwali once again to everyone. You can go and have some Diwali celebration, and I will meet you all tomorrow. So thank you, Vivek. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Sharad. Thank you all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.